Hello everyone, Jay Whitner here with Space Headlines. We do a quick recap of what's happening in space every 2 weeks. And we'll be talking today about the back half of November of 2017. Our first item has to do with Straton launch, which you may be familiar with. This is the giant airplane that Paul Allen is building. What the news is they're still hoping to have their first launch in 2019, which is going to feature a Pegasus rocket that's been around for many years. But the Pegasus rocket is quite expensive. So the news item is that Straton Launch is looking into rocket alternatives that are more affordable than the Pegasus. And they may want to build their own rocket. And they have a deal with NASA to assist them in working toward building their own new rocket. So we'll see how that works out. SpaceX is put a hold on some of their launches because they're concerned about the payload fairing, the nose cone on the Falcon 9. They saw some test results that gave them some concern about this, and they decided to postpone what they're calling the Zuma launch, which is a top secret launch that nobody seems to know what the payload is. They've delayed Zuma, even though the particular rocket that Zuma is on has not evidenced any problems that I've heard about. The problems come from another rocket, but they're putting the Falcon 9 launches on hold while they take a close look at this fairing problem, which is upsetting their launch manifest for December of 2017. Blue Origin is on track still for the 2020 first launch of the New Glenn rocket. If you're not too familiar with the New Glenn rocket, this is a huge, vastly powerful rocket, stronger than any rocket since the Saturn V. And it has a similar capability to the Falcon Heavy. So the Falcon Heavy hopefully is going to have its first flight very soon, and the New Glenn will follow in 2020, in which time we'll have hopefully two rockets that are vastly more powerful than anything we've had in a very long time. So this is great news for our near-term future in space. So keep Blue Origin in mind as the months go by and they rear up toward the 2020 launch. We had a launch of a new weather satellite in November, and this was they call it the Joint Polar Satellite System. So this is obviously in a polar orbit, as you might guess from the name. This is a weather satellite with very, very sensitive instruments. There are 5 instruments aboard the satellite, and it's going to be called NOAA-20 for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So hopefully we'll have improved weather forecasting complements of this satellite. SpaceX in the news again. Gwynne Shotwell's in the image here, obviously. And they are talking about an even faster year in 2018 than 2017. To bring you up to speed on this year they did twice as many launches as last year. That's how it seems like it's going to end up, although there's still a month left. And in 2018, they want to do about 50% more than they did this year. Or put another way, they expect to do 3 times as many launches about in 2018 as they did in 2016. So this is fantastic news. This came out of an interview with Shotwell. And some of the other things that she mentioned in the interview, she talked a little bit about the last version of the Falcon 9, what they call the Block 5. That'll be the most advanced version that they ever make, presumably. The first flight on that is supposed to be early next year. And in addition to a lot of just enhancements in the rocket, it's a more robust rocket. That's one of the big goals, that their first stage of the rocket should be good for 10 flights, they think. So they've built it a little bit more heavy duty for many flights. So this is a big milestone toward full usability for the first stage that's more efficient and get more uses out of each stage. We had a big breakthrough on Kickstarter in November. There was a Kickstarter campaign that was funded in November for a new telescope of vastly more power than what people have had before. It sort of pairs the traditional telescope with a mirror that magnifies the image and does all the things that we normally think of as a telescope. But inside this telescope, in addition to the mirror, they have a low light sensor and computer image processing. And the final analysis is they get a telescope that's hugely more powerful than any traditional telescope that you might have before. So very, very powerful, very lightweight and mobile. So this is a groundbreaking thing for amateur astronomy and also for crowdfunding. This particular campaign raised $2.2 million on Kickstarter and is the new record holder for the most money raised in a space crowdfunding activity on Kickstarter. Jeff Bezos, who you may know of from Amazon, had a personal milestone that Mr. Bezos is now worth $100 billion. He is the richest person anywhere. At 53 years old, this is a pretty big milestone to have. He's worth $100 billion. He got his space start at Princeton University, where he was the president of his SEDS chapter, and later went on to found Amazon and then use some of his proceeds from Amazon to open up Blue Origin, which we mentioned before is on track to launch a extremely powerful rocket in 2020. So congratulations to Mr. Bezos. Thanks for all that you're doing, and keep up the great work. A team from MIT won a design contest in November. The idea was to design a city on Mars. And the concept that you can see from the image is a lot of domes on the surface that are connected to each other through underground tunnels to facilitate transportation to and from each dome without going outside into the no atmosphere basically that you have on Mars and the radiation environment. So a lot of the connectivity is below ground. The domes themselves have pockets of water into the dome structure that blocks radiation. So congratulations to this MIT team. Their idea is 200 domes with 50 people supported by each dome for a city of 10,000 people on Mars. SpaceX did some recent filings with the SEC about their most recent funding round. The understanding in the community had been that the recent funding round was $350 million, and SpaceX amended their filing, so it's $450 million in the recent round. This brings their what investors have put into SpaceX to $1.7 billion, and certainly they've made that money go a long, long way. By space standards, 1.7 billion is not all that much, so SpaceX has definitely done miracles with that money. And in terms of the Falcon Heavy, they had said earlier that the Heavy would launch no earlier than December 29th, and they are now pushing that into January. So sometime probably in early January will now be the first flight of the Falcon Heavy. The idea of the flight is that the two side boosters will hopefully come back from the launch and land at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. The core stage, the core of the first stage, would achieve a higher velocity before it separates from the second stage, and so the core would have to land offshore on the drone ship. All this will happen hopefully in early January, and will be an amazing sight to see. I'm really looking forward to going down there for the launch. So keep your fingers crossed for Falcon Heavy in January. We're going to start the year off right. That's it for the November issue of Space Headlines. I hope that you enjoyed it. Come back and check us out a month or so from now, and we'll talk about what happened in December. Take care.